Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Anthony Joshua vs Francis Ngannou has been confirmed, so see here on screen. So Matchroom confirming it will be held in Saudi Arabia as part of Riyadh season. Queensbury also part of the setup for this card. It announced it as well, along with Joshua's management company. You can see here Freddie Cunningham as manager. Eddie Hearn also with a post saying, "We confirm it's a done deal. Anthony Joshua vs Francis Ngannou collide on a huge night in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Press conference Jan 15 in London, with full details dropping soon." So as we know, there is the undisputed fight happening in February. So presumably this will be the next month. There has been talk that Riyadh season would be closing out with a big card in March. You'd have to guess that this is it, unless they're going to have a couple of different cards. So the more the merrier, I say. And actually, the Saudi Arabians have been, once they've come in recent months with this Riyadh season, obviously we've had some big cards. The Day of Reckoning, Fury and Ngannou was a pretty good big card as well. The undisputed card coming up, and then Joshua versus Ngannou. And the reason that that fight is happening, obviously, Tyson Fury, as we know, legitimized Francis Ngannou in that fight. Fury struggling at times, ultimately getting a decision, but getting dropped in the process. So from what looked like it was a novelty fight, just a cash grab for all involved, all of a sudden Francis Ngannou came out with huge credit. And Anthony Joshua, he was actually going to be fighting Deontay Wilder in March, had Wilder beaten Joseph Parker on the Day of Reckoning card in December 2023. But as we know, Deontay Wilder, one of his worst performances, absolutely fumbles the bag and tens of millions of dollars, and he has been out in a couple of different sort of settings since the loss, saying that Joshua doesn't want to face him anymore. But as we know, that fight was contingent on Wilder winning. So Wilder's only got himself to blame, considering the poor performance that he put in that one. So Anthony Joshua will be facing Francis Ngannou yet. And if you'd have said maybe 6 months ago, Joshua and Ngannou would fight in 2024, and that in the space of 6 months, Francis Ngannou would be transitioning from MMA to boxing and face Tyson Fury, drop him in a fight, run him somewhat close in their fight, and then facing Anthony Joshua immediately after, you'd think that something had really tipped over in the world of sports, that things had gone crazy. But this is the situation we find ourselves in. And as we saw from Francis Ngannou's performance against Tyson Fury, he's pretty judicious with his punching. He's a big, solid guy, heavily muscled, and he knows that he has to manage his energy. So he was looking to be the counterpuncher, and he played that role relatively successfully at times in that fight, although he did sort of seem to fatigue down the stretch, and probably there were some rounds that just sort of slipped by with not a lot happening towards the end, which ultimately gave Fury the win. I mean, I know there were some people at the time saying that Ngannou deserved the win, but just because he got the knockdown in a couple of other rounds, it's still not enough to get, 7 rounds in the bank. I didn't score that one for Ngannou. I thought that later on in the fight, there were rounds there wasn't a lot happening, and Fury was nicking them, and he was being cautious, and he got the job done. So I expect in a fight between Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou, we'll probably see similar things from Ngannou. I think he will be relatively cautious in terms of not wanting to sort of let his hands go too much and too often for the sake of potentially gassing. And as we know in the past, Joshua has sort of run that risk of blowing himself out and then needing rounds to recover. Both these guys heavily muscled, and on the back of that performance against Otto Wallin, you'd think Joshua would be going in confident. That performance against the Swede was his best in the last couple of years. As we've seen since the loss to Andy Ruiz Jr., Joshua sort of not exactly himself. He's sort of been fumbling around a little bit, trying to sort of find a style that works for him, blend the aggression with the technical, and sometimes it hasn't always come off. Although he did put in some credible performances against Alexander Usyk, but ultimately it wasn't enough to get the job done against the best southpaw in the world. 2 losses on the bounce. He's had 3 fights in 2023. Jermaine Franklin, Robert Helenius, and then Otto Wallin. And as we saw, it was a situation where he just beat up on Otto Wallin, who didn't really fire a shot. The body shots snatched his soul, and ultimately Joshua came on strong and started landing some heavy leather up top around the 5th round, and Otto Wallin decided not to come out of his corner after, round 5. So this fight, a little while ago, I would have said it was a complete gimmick, but I guess we can thank Tyson Fury to some extent for legitimizing Francis Ngannou, and I imagine that those fans of Fury won't really have a problem with this, given their guy fought Francis Ngannou as Fury's only fight in 2023. As we've seen, he is dangerous. Is it exactly the fight that I wanted to see or was hoping for next? Not necessarily, because I think one of the things we've been sort of hoping for just generally in the heavyweight division is progression and some of these contenders getting opportunities against big fighters. Would I have preferred to, selfishly, to see Joshua versus Hrgovic? Yeah, probably. But, I mean, and that could have been the fight that could have had a belt on the line, because what will happen is after the first undisputed fight, there will be a rematch. And if there is a rematch, then the belts, the IBF at least will be sort of broken off, and it will become vacant. Joshua and Hrgovic are in line to fight for that. So one of the questions with this fight being taken by Joshua, if that belt becomes vacant, then he may not be in the running to fight for a heavyweight title with Filip Hrgovic, which potentially you could have had that for Riyadh's season. But I guess this far out and there's no stripping of that belt yet, I guess maybe it was a risk that they were like, okay, well, we're just not going to take that risk at this point. It's not to say that he can't have a fight with Hrgovic afterwards, but potentially the IBF may go to the next available guy if Joshua is busy. And Hearn has said just in recent days, with all due respect, we do have a plan. These are all great heavyweights. Andy Ruiz Jr., Frank Sanchez, Joseph Parker, but really the only thing that AJ wants to do is be in massive fights, win the world heavyweight title and fight Tyson Fury or get another crack at Usyk. That's what Ben wants, Ben Davison. Ben wants another crack at Usyk. Obviously, for me, I'd love the Fury fight. When you look at fighting March, fighting September, maybe 2 fights against the Fury-Usyk winner, you're really talking 4 or 5 fights down the line. That may be it. He looked amazing last week, but 5 fights is another year and a half away, maybe 2 years. So how much longer are you going to go? Right now, we're really excited for that 2024. So whether, I guess some people may take umbrage with the comment there that he's sort of saying Ruiz, Sanchez, and Parker, they're good, but AJ doesn't want that. He wants massive fights. He wants to win the world heavyweight title and fight Fury or Usyk. But ultimately, I guess, if Joshua is in some fresh fights that fans want to see, I think all these top guys, instead of recycling themselves against each other, big fights, new fights, fresh fights. I know Joseph Parker was hoping that he'd put himself back in the shop window for a Joshua rematch. Maybe it comes off down the line, but I think we've been there, done that, got the postcard. I know avid Joseph Parker fans think he has earned it now, but obviously Joshua, he's not a title holder at the moment. He can do what he wants. He's not subject to the orders of sanctioning bodies at this point, so he can basically go off and do what he wants. And if he wants to grab a bag of money, well, apparently that's what he's going to do. And I know a lot of people will say, well, he's just going for the money here. But in the same breath, Joshua has made it very clear in the last year or two, that's what he's fighting for. He is a prize fighter and he's going after the money. And after Tyson Fury effectively legitimized Francis Ngannou as a heavyweight contender in the division, he's the WBC at number 10, if you can believe that, loses the fight to Fury and somehow gets ranked at number 10, which personally I think is a bit of a joke. You have to sort of say, well, does he deserve it? Well, it's not about that, really. It falls under that banner of massive fight. Is it the one that I wanted to see? Not necessarily. Will I watch it? Of course. And as we saw against Tyson Fury, Ngannou, if he hits the target, finds the target, he can do some damage. And, there is some risk there that he could potentially put Anthony Joshua down. But I think based on what we've seen more recently of Joshua, especially working with Ben Davison. And this is the other thing with the training situation, because previously with Angel Fernandez and Robert Garcia for that fight, never really sort of publicly said he wasn't working with either, just moved on to Derek James, and now has moved on to Ben Davison without really sort of publicly saying he split from Derek James. So Ben Davison seems to be Johnny on the spot. Those two working together, I think they will be relatively cautious. I think it is going to be quite tactical. I don't think it's going to be a 3-round shootout or anything like that. We've already seen Francis Ngannou play his hand. He wants to play the role of a counterpuncher and work off what you give him. So I think Joshua and Davison, they will work to a strategy, working behind the jab and looking for openings, and it could be a low-volume fight. And if anything, that favours both Joshua and also Ngannou, because a high-volume fight is going to see them gas out, tire out, then all of a sudden, it gets all sloppy. I think Joshua is going to be the tactician, as he was largely against Otto Wallin and in some of his more recent fights, and look to break Ngannou down. For Ngannou, he's looking for a big shot on the counter. I think that's his path to victory, is knocking Joshua out. Whereas I think Joshua's got two paths, either sort of boxing smart into a decision, working behind the jab, trying to stay out of trouble and, breaking him down and knocking him out, or getting a decision. So it's a little interesting that it's made. I mean, the Saudis really seem to be into Francis Ngannou. After his years of getting, okayish money in the UFC, comes to boxing, getting huge paydays automatically. Whether this is going to be a huge commercial success, it's hard to say, because we don't really know what sort of numbers officially the last Fury and Ngannou fight did. I mean, there's been rumors it was, 65k, or, that it wasn't great, but, I mean, does it really matter? It's an interesting fight to some extent, but if Joshua's, still at the peak of his powers or somewhere there or thereabout, he should be able to beat Francis Ngannou. But as we saw against Tyson Fury, Ngannou, he finds the target, he can hurt you, he can put you down, maybe even take you out. So Joshua Ngannou, potentially for March, we'll have to see, January 15th, press conference, all that sort of jazz. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.